Hello, thanks for visiting my reading room. I'm Nancy, and I'm not the perfect reader, but I'll do my best. My mission with my reading room is to create a love for reading cover to cover, one book at a time. I think it's something that our country needs. We need many more leaders and not just followers. And I think by building critical thinking skills through reading, it can really enhance the ability to decipher and be more discerning with information and put it through our own filters rather than being spoon-fed and told what to believe. So I think it's a very good thing. And so that is my whole mission with my reading room. And it's a labor of love on my part. I don't ask for money or donations. So don't get scammed if you see somebody out there asking for donations or money under this name. Know that it's not me. It's not coming from me. Anyway, so tonight we are reading from the Hardy Boys' Running on Fumes by Franklin W. Dixon. And we begin. Chapter 1, Crash or Burn, Joe. I grabbed the closet chair and hurled it at the huge window behind the desk. Nothing, not even a crack. Safety glass, I told my brother Frank. Standard in an office building, especially on the 22nd floor, Frank answered. He didn't look up from the computer. His fingers scurried over the keyboard. I grabbed the chair and slammed it against the glass again. Bam! 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 I could feel the impact all the way up my arm bones to my shoulders. The smell of smoke was getting stronger. We had to get out of here. The floor was shut down. The elevators were off. Not that you should use elevators in a fire. The doors to the stairs were locked tight. Somebody wanted us dead. Break, you piece of rat poop, break! I swung the chair like it was a bat, and I was trying to knock the bat out of the stadium. Yay! Finally, a hairline fracture appeared in the glass. I beat on the piece where the glass had weakened. The crunch of the glass under the chair was the best sound I'd ever heard. Frank, we've got an escape hatch. I stuck my head through the shattered window, and my stomach shriveled into the size of a BB. It was probably a tenth of a mile to the ground. And take it from me, when it's a tenth of a mile straight down, it's a long, long way. You've got the chutes, right? I asked Frank. He grunted. He didn't appreciate my sense of humor. Maybe because he had none himself. Okay, so, rope. We need rope, I muttered. We were going to need rope if we were to go to rappel down the side of the building. Problem is, your average high-powered and totally corrupt lawyer's office doesn't come with rope. I scanned the room looking for a substitute. Cords off of the 2 standing lamps, maybe? I snatched the letter opener off the massive wooden desk and started hacking away at the closest cord. Smoke was starting to creep into the room from under the door. Not much time left. Why couldn't the office have steel doors like the stairwells did? How's it going, Frank? I asked as I started to work on the second electrical cord. This firewall is like nothing I've ever seen before. Elegant, my brother answered, eyes still glued to the monitor. I'm more worried about the firewall on the other side of the door, I shot back. I gotta get through it. The keys clacked under Frank's fingers. If I don't, he didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what would happen if he didn't get through that firewall to the list of witnesses. You worry about getting you and Frank out of here alive, I ordered myself. Let him worry about the witnesses. With a figure 8 knot, I tied the 2 pieces of cord together. The combined length would get us down about a story and a half. That left 19 and a half stories to go. Wait, 20 and a half. I'd forgotten about the lobby. I yanked the cord out of the phone. The phone was dead anyway. Another piece of the kill Frank and Joe Hardy plan. I guess it wouldn't have done much good to trap us in a burning building if we could just call the fire department. I strode around the room, jerking the cord free from the little metal staples that held it to the wall. That'll get me another few stories, I thought as I added the phone cord to my rope. The computer had some decent cordage I could use, but I couldn't have it until Frank was done, and even with that, we still needed more. What else? What else? The carpet that covered a big section of the polished wood floor. Perfect, but it would take me hours to cut it into strips with a letter opener. Wait, I just busted through a window. There were shards of glass everywhere. I snagged a piece and set to work on the carpet. Good thing it was thin. You'd think hitting the ground would save me from the smoke, but there was no escape. In seconds, my eyes were watering. Each breath was like swallowing sandpaper. I ripped off my shirt and hoisted myself onto my feet. I'd spotted a mini fridge in here for the first time. I'd visited Frank on his intern job. That was his cover, high school intern at the law firm. Mine was annoying brother of high school intern. I dashed to the fridge and helped myself to 2 bottles of water. Frank, heads up. I tossed him one of the bottles and poured one on my shirt. I used the shirt sleeves to tie the damp cloth over my face and then got back to work. I tied the strips of carpet together as fast as I could, added them to the rope. Still not enough. I added strips of the heavy drapes. The smoke was as thick as fog now, orange-tinted fog. The flames were eating the door to the office. Any second, they'd start on the ceiling. "I'm through," Frank called, voice muffled by the wet shirt tied over his mouth and nose. Just got to copy the names. He hit a few keys, and the file started to download onto a CD. I tied one end of the rope to one leg of the desk. Nothing to use as a hook in here, right? It's not like I could make some strong metal rings out of paper clips. We'll have to dulfersits. File's done, the computer announced. A second later, Frank had the CD in his hand. I added all the computer cables to my rope. I still wasn't sure it was long enough to get us to the ground. Go, 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 Frank ordered. I didn't have to be told twice. I wrapped the rope around my body and under my butt. The sits part of the dulfersits rappelling technique means you sit on the rope. Aunt Trudy, whoops. Then I took a deep breath, turned around, and climbed out the window. The breeze was strong up there, swinging me out to the left. I managed to get my feet positioned against the building and started to slide down the rope, moving from phone cord to carpet to curtain to computer cord to nothing. No more rope. And my feet hadn't hit the pavement yet. I twisted my head around, trying to see the ground. "Joe, jump!" Frank shouted. I looked up and saw that the cloth part of the rope had started to burn above my brother's hands. Frank needed me out of his way. I closed my eyes and let go. Chapter 2, Fatal Blow. Frank. Good morning. Morning glory. Time to get up. I rolled over and checked my alarm clock. I have 3 more minutes, I called to Aunt Trudy, and I wanted every second of them. Aunt Trudy pushed open the door. "I'm not letting you be late when you have finals, Frank, and that's that." I knew the progression. If I didn't get up now, Aunt Trudy would pull off the covers. If I still didn't get up, she'd dump a glass of water over my head. "Okay, I'm up. I sprang to my feet. Other than extreme lack of sleep and a smoke-fried throat, I felt pretty good. Aunt Trudy nodded her approval. No backsies. I guess that's what she... No backsies, she warned us as she left the room. Sometimes Aunt Trudy thinks I'm still 5 years old. Yeah, that word kind of surprised me. Although I have to admit, it was sort of tempting to crawl back into the sheets. Instead, I pulled on my jeans and a clean shirt, then trotted down the hall. I couldn't stop myself from cracking up when I spotted Joe halfway down the stairs. His blonde hair was plastered to his head with water. Aunt Trudy got him good. Plus, he was limping. "Hey, are you all right?" I asked as I caught up to him. "As all right as possible after crash landing onto a cement sidewalk and then having you crash land on top of me," Joe answered. He was careful to keep his voice low. Aunt Trudy and our mom don't know anything about the missions Joe and I take on for ATAC. They've never even heard of the American Teens Against Crime organization, even though Dad is the one who founded it. ATAC is top secret. The whole reason the squad exists is because teenagers can get into certain places adults can't. No questions asked. If everybody knew there were teen crime fighters around, that wouldn't be true anymore. We grabbed our backpacks on the way out the front door and almost tripped over Mom. She had the whole veranda covered with junk. Well, I call it junk. Mom thinks of it as a treasure. "Careful," Mom said. "I just got the aluminum and the tin divided." She pointed to 2 of the piles of trash. You don't have to separate those, do you? Joe asked. Metal is metal to the recycling plant. Yes, but the kids are going to make luminarias out of the tin cans at the library after school program, Mom explained. Recycling isn't just throwing things into a blue garbage can, she continued. I'm saving up corks from wine bottles to make a bulletin board. Mom nodded toward another one of her piles. And I'm thinking of making picture frames out of those CD cases. Merry Christmas. Playback, our parrot, called from his perch in the sun. Ho, ho, ho. It's June, I told the bird. He ignored me. And don't give her any ideas, Joe added, smiling at Playback. Ho, 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 Playback said again. He sounded freakishly like Aunt Trudy. She'd spent the holidays ho-ho-hoing. The parrot can imitate anything. You should hear his impression of the doorbell. Okay, no CD case picture frames for Joe next Christmas, Mom said. How do you feel about a waste paper basket made of egg cartons? Joe groaned. Mom laughed. Come on, I told my brother. We carefully began... Sorry. I'll sneeze there. We carefully began weaving our way around the piles and headed toward the front steps. A squawk cut through the air, and it didn't come from Playback. Aunt Trudy rushed across the porch, knocking the tin cans into the tower of used foil. I can't believe I let you two sleep so late that you don't have time for breakfast. And on the day of your finals... Aunt Trudy shoved sports bottles into her hands. At least drink some water. You can't think clearly when you're dehydrated. I told your father that this morning, but would he listen? No. Where is Dad anyway? Joe asked. I took a swig of water so Aunt Trudy would calm down. One of his breakfasts with the other retired cops, Mom said. She started to get her piles back in order. Breakfast? Aunt Trudy snorted. Donuts and black coffee and some diner with sticky tables, if that counts as a decent breakfast. I doubted he was there, though. Dad usually said he was meeting up with friends from the force when he had ATEC business himself. I knew he'd be disappointed that he didn't get to hear the details of Joe's and my mission first thing. Drink, drink, Aunt Trudy urged. I took another long swallow, tasting smoke along the way. I wondered how long that would last. Your Aunt Trudy is right, Mom agrees. The body needs water for transporting hormones, chemical messengers, and nutrients. Did you know the brain is 85% water? Can you tell our Mom is the research librarian? With prolonged dehydration, the brain cells actually start to shrink, she told us. I drained the rest of the bottle and heard Joe slurping down his. Thanks, Aunt Trudy, Joe said. It came out sounding like Auntie. Now my brain cells are nice and fat and ready to kick it on those finals. Aunt Trudy beamed. See you later, I called over my shoulder. Wimps, 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 Playback called in farewell. Must have been something he picked up from his previous owner. Nothing to do with me and Joe. I mean, do you know any wimps who ride motorcycles? Motorcycles with hydraulic clutch, optimized suspension, fog lamps with flint protectors, hazard warning, digital CD player, and CB radio? Didn't think so. Joe and I climbed on our bikes and roared off to school. Well, roared off at the speed limit. Teenage guys riding motorcycles are traffic cop bait. Just for your information. I'm not liking how that looks, Joe said when we parked our bikes in the school lot. I followed his gaze. I didn't like the scene either. Brian Conrad was talking to our friend Chet Morton. The thing is, guys like Brian never talk to guys like Chet. Guys like Brian insult guys like Chet. They bully guys like Chet. They punch guys like Chet. But talk? No. I hurried over to them. Joe was right behind me. I think I saw you looking at my sister. We arrived in time to hear Brian say. He was right in Chet's face. Chet's pale face. Chet's a great guy and everything, but he hasn't ever figured out that the way to deal with the Brians in the world is to show no fear. Belinda isn't Chet's type, Joe jumped in. Brian whipped his head toward Joe. You're saying my sister isn't good enough for this dillweed? Chet took the opportunity to move away from Brian and closer to Joe and me. Everyone knows Belinda is gaga over my brother here. I felt heat flood up on my neck. Don't let me be blushing. That's all I could think. Do not let me be blushing. I have this minor problem. I kind of turn into a moron around girls, especially hot girls like Belinda. Even hearing Joe talk about her and me, well, you can't get more moronic than blushing. I don't get it myself. Everybody knows I'm the better looking one, Joe added. The bell rang. I don't want any of the three of you sniffing around Belinda. Brian nailed each of us with a look that was supposed to be chilling. He kept his eyes on me the longest. Like I'd ever attempt to talk to Belinda. Not because I was scared of Brian, but because I was scared of making a total fool out of myself. I held Brian's stare until he turned and walked away. So, were you checking out Belinda? Joe asked Chet as we headed inside. Hey, she was checking me out. I was just standing there, Chet flexed, as if he had muscles to flex. Yeah, right, I thought. Chet's a good friend, but he's kind of a dork sometimes. I mean, he was all attitude now that he was alone with me and Joe. But I noticed he couldn't stop himself from looking over his shoulder to make sure Brian hadn't heard. See you guys at lunch, I said when we reached the door to my first period class. Chemistry, final number 1. It wasn't that hard, at least not with my superhydrated brain, which was lucky because Joe and I hadn't got much studying done last night. Make that no studying, none. Although the story from Mom and Aunt Trudy was that we'd come home so late because we'd pulled a late night study fest at Chet's. English was a little more difficult, but only because I sit behind Belinda in English, and that's sort of distracting. Next up, PE, a break from the brain work. Nice. I was looking forward to it. That is, until I found out we were fencing. And who did Mr. Zwick assign to be my fencing partner? Yep, Brian Conrad. I slid my mesh front mask into place. Brian and I faced off. Don't forget what I said this morning, Hardy. Brian thrust his foil at me, going on the attack. I parried. Now it was my turn to attack. Have you ever noticed how people who talk all the time never actually do anything? I asked. I jabbed my foil and hit Brian on the arm. That didn't count. To get a point in fencing, you have to touch the tip of your foil to the torso of your opponent. Head and arms don't get you any points. If my sister could see you now, she'd get over her little crush. She goes for jocks. I didn't bother to reply. Brian came at me again. I blocked. Thrust. He blocked. We circled each other, foils clashing. A line of sweat trickled down my back as the clanging of metal on metal filled my ears. Brian's eyes stayed on mine. I could see them through the double layers of mesh, mine and his. Then he glanced left. I jerked my foil in that direction, sure he was going to strike that way. Instead, he brought the foil to my heart. If this was a real fight, you'd be dead, Brian announced. This steel would slice right through your heart. He turned and walked away. I was still thinking about his words at lunch when I met up with Joe at my locker. If this was a real fight, you'd be dead. Brian was right. If there hadn't been protective tips on our foils, if I hadn't been wearing padding, if we hadn't been just two guys in gym class, I would be dead right now. I'd blown it. I twirled in the combination and opened my locker. Brian's voice continued in my head. This steel would slice through your heart. My heart. I blinked twice. It was still there. There was a heart inside my locker. Chapter 3, the next assignment. Ooh, Frank's got a secret admirer. I reached for the big red heart-shaped box of candy jammed in the bottom of my brother's locker. I called the one with nuts. Frank slapped my hand away. Is there a note? I asked. A mushy note? Oh, how I love you, Frankie baby, honey, doll face. Whoever sent it is calendar challenged. Valentine's Day isn't this week. Frank blushed. My brother actually blushes. And girls still like him. I seriously don't get it. He opened the heart-shaped box, and suddenly I wasn't thinking about girl psychology anymore. There was no candy in the box, only a nice wad of cash, a folded map, and a video game disc. The label on the front read, Running on Fumes. We were about to get our next ATAC assignment. This is how they always come, disguised as video games. We need some privacy. Frank led the way out onto the quad and over to the oak tree at the far corner. I pulled my portable game player out of my backpack and plopped down on the grass. Frank sat next to me and handed over the game. I slid it into the slot. I love the sound of that click when the disc is in place. My heart actually starts to beat faster every single time. I never get tired of the moment when we're about to find out the next assignment. I hit play. The Earth appeared on the small screen, a small blue and white ball spinning. That didn't tell me much. Our assignment was somewhere in the world. Duh. Humans share the Earth with as many as 100 million other species. As the narrator spoke, trees and fungus and animals and insects and single-cell organisms took over the screen, new ones appearing every second, filling every inch. But 270,000 of these species become extinct every year. Red X's slashed across the monitor, crossing out creatures I hadn't even known existed in the first place. This extreme extinction rate has occurred only 5 times before in the history of the Earth, caused by meteors, volcanic eruptions, or rapid climate change. Meteors? That's one of the theories about what killed off the dinosaurs, Frank commented. Thanks, Mom. Sometimes my brother sounds like a research librarian himself. What I want to know is what this has to do with us. But nature has nothing to do with the massive extinction going on today, the narrator continued. I couldn't get my eyes off of those red X's. How could that many species disappear every year? Entire species. It made my head hurt to think about it. The current extinction explosion is caused by a photo of Frank and me appeared. Humans. Somebody at the home office has a warped sense of humor, Frank said. I'm still not seeing the connection to us, I complained. What's the mission? Pictures of tons more people appeared on the screen. Humans consume nearly half of all the Earth's resources. This man wants to change all that. His name is Arthur Stench. One man replaced all the people filling the screen. He looked like he was in his 50s. He was losing his hair, but he had a long beard and enough hair for his whole body. It looked like he worked out. Arthur Stench has a compound in the California desert. It's a place where people gather to live in harmony with the land, where they can give back to the earth. I felt like giving the game player a shake. Was I watching a PBS special or what? What was the assignment? Stench's photo faded and a picture of a desert came up. All scrubby brush and cactus and rocks with some mountains in the background. We have no visual of the actual compound. Visitors are not welcome. That's where you two come in. Many of Stench's followers are teenagers. Your assignment is to infiltrate the compound. I don't get it, I said. Stench sounds like one of the good guys. It was like the narrator had heard me. Stench may be a harmless man, even a hero, but we have received information about his using extreme measures to force people into following his beliefs. Threats, arson, bombing, even murder. We need to put an end to it. But first, we need to determine whether or not he really is a threat. So, it's not all about recycling, I muttered. I stared at Stench's picture. Like, if I stared at it long enough, I'd be able to see into his brain. There are no roads leading to the compound. You won't find any hotels or fast food places. It's unlikely you'll see any people until you arrive. We recommend using your motorcycles. Our juiced-up bikes appeared on the screen, flying across the desert. No roads, no speed limits. Cool. This mission, like every mission, is top secret. In 5 seconds, this disc will be reformatted into a regular music CD. Exactly 5 seconds later, some Cher songs began playing at top volume. I heard a few laughs from one of the other kids on the quad before I could rip the disc out of the player. You know what this means? Frank's dark brown eyes were gleaming. Yes, I do, my friend. It means road trip, we said together. No boring stay-at-home summer for us. We were taking the bikes all the way across the country. How excellent was that? And I'll stop right there.